Welcome to Beyond the Corporate Ladder, thoughtful conversations on leadership, growth, and long-term perspective with your host, Stephen Lee Thomas. Each episode features thoughtful conversations with leaders and operators about growth, decision-making, and what it really looks like to build a meaningful life as your career evolves. Hey everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Corporate Ladder. Today my guest is Johnny Lynum. Now Johnny is a financial advisor, but has actually focused really in on the real estate space and has a background, probably more of an expertise in the 1031 exchanges. So if you know what that is, pay attention. If you don't know what that is, also pay attention because you may actually be sitting on some good tax advantages. And I would love to explore more how Johnny could help you with that. Johnny, thanks so much for being on the show, man.
Yeah, no, thanks, Stephen. I appreciate the invite. I'm glad to be here today.
Johnny, can you tell us a little bit more about your background and what you're currently doing?
Yeah, no, great. Originally from Alabama, went off the University of Alabama, Roll Tide, and upon graduation, off to the Air Force. And a little bit over 20 years later, now I'm retired. Uh, Picked up real estate along the way, and that's been great. And once I retired, I kind of found my way into financial advising, and really with a emphasis on helping commercial real estate investors place capital, especially after liquidation events like selling and 1031 exchanges, but then also just bringing more awareness to more institutional real estate opportunities.
So how did you get from Air Force to commercial real estate into multifamily specifically? Because I don't think that that's like probably they don't teach you that in the Air Force. I think it's a smart decision, but how did you go down that path?
No, phenomenal question. It definitely was not the planned path. And honestly, it just came about from, one, have received an opportunity to use my VA loan to buy my first property back in 2006 in Warner Robins, Georgia. And then from there, I became infatuated with real estate and just really, the whole process where, I came from humble beginnings, didn't really know a lot about investing. Even after having an engineering degree and coming out of college, I still didn't know a lot about, when it came to my credit score and how to invest in a property, how to buy a property, just the impact on interest rates and things like that, it really infatuated me. So I joined my local real estate meetup during that time, learned a heck of a lot, and I bought a foreclosure at my next duty station. And from there, it just became a passion. Got married. We started picking up small rentals back in Birmingham, where my wife was from. And in 2015, we took the leap and created our own fix and flip business, just like you see on HGTV. We took the
Hmm.
leap of faith back in 2015, and we did one property. And 5 years later, we stumbled into our first 18-unit apartment complex. And it's been a blessing ever since. We're really picking up more apartments in Alabama since then, retiring, wrote a book, and now really serving commercial real estate investors in that space as a financial advisor today.
Oh man, that is awesome. So along that journey, you probably learned a lot, maybe made a few mistakes along the way. If you look at how your career has unfolded, what do you feel has really contributed the most to where you're at today? I mean, now you're running your own business, right?
Yeah, no, that's a great question because there we are a product of our environment, if you will, and really of our experiences. And so I will say, those over those 20 years, from just managing, $1 billion contract and executing $100 million plus a year, and from being deployed and being a husband and father to three beautiful kids, like you're picking up nuggets everywhere, and I think one of the top ones, that I bring with me still today is really the grit and toughness that it takes to really achieve and persevere in the face of adversity. Whatever the situation, whether it's on the battlefield, it's in a corporate boardroom, or it's at the dinner table. We're trying to lead your kids or lead your spouse. That I think being able to have that grit and that wherewithal to to think through and be able to think outside the box to come up with solutions in order to find that success.
What does grit mean to you?
Grit means getting hit in the face and still getting up to get the job done. And and I think for a lot of people, it it hits you in a time you have to dig in to find it at the least prepared time in your life. And I think for a lot of for me at least, I can speak to for being in finding that grit has always leaned a bit me leaning on my faith and just belief in Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior, and and being able to lean on my faith. Because a lot of times it's easy to say you have faith and to to have the smile on your face when everything's going good, but really being able to dig deep and find that resolve and find that faith and confidence in your ability to find that solution and to keep moving forward in the face of adversity, I think has really been the number one driver thus far in my
Is
life.
is that a skill set that you've had to develop, and has that impacted the way you make decisions today as opposed to, 10, 20 years ago?
Heck yeah, 100%. Just because, every day is going to be different, every challenge is going to be different. And I have learned over the years that operating in change and growing is the process, is part of the process for growth. If you're staying conservative, you're staying stagnant, that, you may not see a lot of adversity. But if you're stretching yourself, you're growing, you're looking to take advantage of different opportunities, then yes, you're going to experience that. And I think for me, like every level is going to have a different level of challenge, and you're going to have to rise to the occasion just because the person, the individual that you become today has got you this far, but to go to another level to achieve that level of growth, then you're going to have to change the person you are in order to make it there.
Would you say you're using the term adversity? I want to be a little bit more blunt here. Failure. Would you say that failure is part of the process? It is part of the journey?
It is. And I think, and it's really, with looking at how you label failures and how you take those with you to serve you. Because, one of the things I have had to learn and, and still learning today, that failures and setbacks are a setup for your continued growth if you choose to see it that way. And I think that's where the rubber meets the road. And for a lot of people, we come to that fork in the road that you can either look at that failure as an opportunity and a lesson learned, or you can look at it as woe is me, everything is stacked against me, and
Uh-huh.
now I'm a victim, I'm a statistic. And so it's all about your perception and how you choose to look at it in the moment. And I think really being able to reflect on that experience and know that's how all of us, that's how we learn.
So shifting from why me to, I don't know if I want to say like lucky me, but from why me to, oh, this needed to happen. Like I needed to go through this because it's going to help set me up some point in the future.
Yep, 100%. And I think finding that silver lining, and it won't be all in the same day. It won't be, hey, you get that phone call, somebody broke in and stole five HVACs out of your multifamily unit that was vacant and tore out the plumbing, and the insurance policy is null and void just because the occupancy was below 32%. That it's not going to be right there that same day, but
Right.
it's going to take maybe a couple weeks or even maybe a couple months to look back and like, oh, I learned that the hard way. I know what not to do in this next deal, and I know, hey, it all worked out in the good, long term. But you have to keep moving and keep moving forward in order to be able to give yourself enough time to achieve that perspective on everything.
So Johnny, with you mentioned a little while ago, wife, family, you've also got work. Obviously very busy. How do you find balance in life managing all of that?
No, that's a good one. Time hacking has been a big one, leveraging that calendar, and being able to block time accordingly for those things that are most important. I think that was one of the big things because, I mentioned that my wife and I, we started our business in 2015. Leading up until last year when I retired, I've been working two jobs for the last decade, 10 years,
Wow.
with having a side business, leading that effort, with multiple projects. And thankfully, my wife was able to step in during the day while I'm at work, but to work with contractors, to work with the municipalities, to work with the property managers to kind of keep projects going along. And so it's been a challenge, at times, with 2019, I think that was the busiest year. We did 12 properties. But as you pick up like larger multifamilies, they have enough challenges within themselves with just a single deal And so for me, the time blocking, but then also leaning on the leadership side with having the right people around you
Hmm. Hmm.
that you can rely on and that you can put trust in to get the job done. And so I think, having the right team and the right people around me has been instrumental to my success, especially, with everything that I've done in real estate has been at long distance, easily 10 hours away from the properties and the projects. And so really having the right team has been key to finding success over the years.
So you mentioned you went full time. You retired a year ago, right? So if
Mhm.
you're now in the point where you're I mean, I know you've been forward looking, but like the rubber meets the road. Like when you retire from your job, your back's against the wall, so to speak, right? Like you're like, I got to make this shit work. Like it's really got to work now, right? Depending on how you built your runway. So forward thinking, 5 to 10 years from now, what is it you're really focused on building?
No, that's a great question, and one that has really been top of mind. I won't say struggle with, but it's definitely been top of mind on defining that next level of success. And I think really for me, it's wrapped around, being there for my kids. My oldest is 12 right now, so I have 6 years left with him before he's off doing his thing, whether it's going to college, trade school, or getting a job, whatever he chooses to do. But for me, really, once I realized that we spend 90% of our time with our kids by the age of 18, that it really lit the fire to me to kind of make the time count, make the experiences count in the meantime. So really, they're balancing that between, we're all capitalists here in America,
Uh-huh.
and balancing the generating revenue and driving that towards spending time with family. And so for me, it's building a lifestyle business where, figuring out what's the sweet spot with achieving success. But at the same time, I'm not building something at a breakneck speed that, it's demanding 60, 70 hours a week and a lot of time away from the family.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned the children. My son recently turned 11. And the harsh realization that like he's like those 11 years went by super fast, and I got less time than that until he's likely out of the house. Maybe he'll stick around a long time. I don't know. But to your point,
Mm-hmm.
it's when your head's down and you're working on building something, or even in your career, if you're still working a career, it's really easy to be caught up in that. But I think I love what you said there, that your focus is really, yes, you're doing this, but I've got a family. Like my kids are growing and they'll be out of the house soon. And the time I'm going to be spending with them is very small. And probably uh he's to the point he's wanting to spend more time with his friends, maybe, and less time at home. And it's only going to get more and more so. So I think that's fantastic there. Um, Shifting back over into the workspace, what are some topics or some areas that you're paying more attention to now than maybe you were 5 years ago?
Yeah, definitely for me on the workspace and really having a offshore team that I work with is really the people side of it and really getting to know those that work with me and work on my team. Where I'm looking back at lessons in the past where I failed my previous offshore employees, just where I wasn't as present. And so I
Hmm.
think really right now is building that culture. We're really big on the culture and the military side of things, and so even when you're not face to face in the office and in virtual meetings, to really have at top of mind the culture that I'm building here, even with us just being a small, nimble team, but making sure that I don't lose sight of the culture that I'm building, and really being in a position to understand the goals and ambitions of those that work for me, employees that are part of my team, to make sure that we're really leading the right type of organization where people want to stay and work.
So you mentioned offshore team. How long have you been working with the offshore team?
Hired my first VA back in virtual assistant back in 2018.
Okay, so it's been a minute. Um, so someone listening to this, maybe they haven't hired a VA or someone offshore and they're considering that, going down a similar path. What's something that you wish you understood or knew sooner that you could share, which would have made that a whole lot easier for you?
No, that's a great question because I think a lot of CEOs and business owners don't realize the hidden treasure that resides with offshore talent. And the thing that I really wasn't aware of was just the level of presence offshore for a lot of the Fortune 500 companies that are leveraging a lot of talent in the Philippines. When you look at their call centers, the individuals that are working and answering the phone, whether it's Merrill Lynch and some of the financial services companies as well too. So there's a lot of educated, college educated talent out there where English is their primary language
Hmm.
that have diverse skill sets and can really step into your business and be instrumental to success and growth. So I think for just the entrepreneurs and CEOs out there, business owners, that I think it's something to definitely consider when you start looking at how you're growing your company and how you're leveling up and where potentially in the organization you can look at leveraging offshore talent.
So rip the band-aid off, just do it. The talent doesn't have to be local. It is worldwide. I can attest to that, like 100%. Very, very talented people across the world. And I have a few VAs that I work with, and very, very talented individuals, and have been able to work with VAs in multiple parts of the world. Not my own, but people that I know or have interacted with, and I've worked with their VAs from all around the world. So I think that's a really smart thing to do is leverage that, especially as you're first getting started as a business owner. Um, Cultural differences. Is that something that you had to learn to account for when beginning to work with VAs?
For me, not so much, and I think that's a testament just to my military experience with working with foreign partners, traveling worldwide with deployments, and I think so. I've definitely had a sensitivity when it
Okay.
comes to working with partners abroad and really understanding just the cultural nuances and being able to pick up on those, but then really leaning into wanting to learn about those different nuances, holidays, traditions and things of that nature that they are passionate about and that really mean a lot to them. So I think I've had a little awareness that that was something that the Air Force gave me along the way.
You sound like you'd be a really good leader, Johnny. Just the things that you said of like awareness, I think sums it up. And these are human beings, and we all want that level of connection. And they're not just punching in and out of a clock. They've got a family, right? They've got parents. They've got to take their kids to school. A lot of times they work, off hours. When I say off hours, like opposite hours of us, so maybe they're working through the night, and they got to get kids to school during the day. So I think the more you realize, you're providing somebody's well-being, right? You're contributing to that and respect that. I think they, 10 times forward pay that respect back to you. And so, that's one of the things I learned in leadership was focus on making focus on making the people in your organization successful, and they will in turn make you successful. Like you are nothing without making them successful. Because if they can't be successful, then no, it becomes a burden for a lot of people. Johnny, I want to shift focus into what you're doing today and how you're helping people out, because early on in our careers, a lot of times we're just focused on getting the next job, making a little bit more money, buying the house, getting the car. But there comes a point where we're like, okay, I'm making good money. I can't max out my 401k anymore, or I'm maxing it out and I still have this extra money. What do I do with it? There's some options here. So, you help people who have made a decision at some point when it comes to creating some additional passive income or passive investments, right?
Right.
Can you tell us more about, how that works and how you help people out with that?
Yeah, no, most definitely. Right now, my practice really centralizes around advising commercial real estate owners, uh, CPAs, as well as qualified intermediaries, just on really structuring capital transitions into institutional passive deals. What does that mean? So really, investing in funds, investing in deals that were normally exclusive to Wall Street through private placements, and now really exposing those to other accredited investors that don't realize that they qualify to invest in some of these opportunities. as a method to diversify into hard assets. So that's been one of my passions, just being in real estate and being successful in that, right? But then now really looking and being passionate about learning more about investing at a broader global level. And so that's one of the things that really, the education behind that with, building diversified portfolio. And so now really it's my ability to help serve those that work in the real estate space to really level up and find a broader level of wealth that they are able to build through leveraging these type of this asset class. So
Okay. Can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by diversification? I mean, I have like my perspective of what that is, but how are you helping people like really diversify?
no, great. As most Americans that we inherently when we talk about investments, that it really goes and points back to stocks and bonds, traditional investing, Wall Street. But there's another level of investing. When we start talking about real estate, that goes into alternative investments. And when you start looking at the different levels of real estate for commercial real estate, retail, you have, healthcare of that nature. But then also you have private equity, private credit, you have other offerings out there where you can diversify and find uncorrelated investments. I had a gentleman that's a founder earlier this week that I brought on for my LinkedIn Deal Makers Club that talked about buying IP, music IP, intellectual property,
Hmm.
and just uncorrelated to the stock market. Somewhat recession proof when you start talking about the number of streams that are really uncorrelated to the economy, whether we're in a recession or not, that people are going to, buy their music and listen to their music. And so it's really looking across the board. Tony Robbins wrote a book last year, The Holy Grail of Investing, that talked about the really his investment thesis is really centered around, and this was after, interviewing private equity, the top guys on Wall Street from private equity and other Fortune 500 companies, that the holy grail of investing centered around having seven uncorrelated investments in your portfolio. And so I think really more so now is really be educating myself, but also educating others on how their portfolio today is impacted by the current level of diversification they had, and then really it's just exposing and educating them to what else is out here, in the other side of the coin, to look at how you can build wealth, and really have a diversified portfolio where you don't have all your eggs in one basket, as the analogy goes.
So if somebody was to argue that they had a diversified stock portfolio, what are your thoughts on that?
Everyone's risk profile and suitability is going to be different.
Okay.
So for them, yeah, it may be diversified enough for them. And so I think that's one of the things that has taught me as being an advisor. Everyone's situation is going to be completely different. And so there's not one blanket answer on, hey, this is how you should be set up, because it evolves as you age, as your income needs change, and as your sources of income diversifies, your portfolio is going to look different. And and just life situations happen that it's going to be continue to move. And I think that's why it's important where someone has an advisor that has that 20, 30,000 foot view, that's working with different clients, and they're seeing a lot of different portfolios, but then also seeing a lot of different nuances and opportunities out there where you're great and focused on building income and focus on what you're great at. But now being able to have that advisor, having that
Hmm.
CPA, having that intermediary on the qualified side, that are qualified intermediary with the 1031 exchanges, and just really having a team to help you manage your wealth is what it's all about. And I think when you start looking at, anyone that's great, that there's always a team behind them, whether it's, Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant or, Tiger Woods or some great individual sport. Same thing as a team sport, that you're going to have some great coaches and talent around them in order for them to get the best of their talent.
Hey, real quick, Johnny, can you explain what a 1031 or 1031 exchange is for someone listening that might not know what that is?
Oh yeah, great. Yeah, so the 1031 exchange, so it is a piece of the IRS tax code that allows real estate investors to defer paying capital gains on the profit they make on a sale. So say essentially you bought a property for $100,000 and 10 years ago, and now it's done really good, and now is worth $1 million. And so it's gone up $900,000 in value over that 10-year period. And so now you're going to owe taxes, capital gains taxes on that gain that you've had from 100,000 to the new value of 900,000. And so in order to defer paying that taxes and take that 900,000 and invest it in another property that you own and continue to get more growth from and hopefully cash flow, the 1031 part of the IRS tax code, Rule 1031 allows you to buy a like kind property that you can roll all that money into and defer paying taxes on that gain. And so that's where the 1031 exchange comes from. And there's some nuances of rules where you have to have a qualified intermediary that takes the proceeds from that closing when you sell the property. They hold the money while you have 45 days to identify up to 3 proper replacement properties that you would like to buy. And then from there, you have 135 days to close on one of those 3 properties, or all 3, depending on how the price point and how much capital that you're deploying.
Okay, so there's a huge tax saving strategy right there that people might not even be aware of, that they can take and roll into something else and just keep investing that money over and over. So that's absolutely something Johnny can help you out with. So Johnny, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, be on the show. If someone wants to connect with you, learn more about you, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, best way, my website, johnnylynum.com, or simply on LinkedIn. Shoot me a message on LinkedIn and say, hey, you heard me on the podcast and would like to connect, and would love to have a conversation.
Awesome, Johnny. Thanks so much. And for those of you listening, we'll catch you in the next episode. Thanks. Thanks for spending time with me today on Beyond the Corporate Ladder. If this conversation resonated with you and you feel like you have a perspective that could add value for others, you can learn more about being a guest at beyondthecorporateladder.com. Thanks so much for listening.